There is a moment in a man's life that rarely gets spoken about. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with fireworks or obvious chaos. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all, but internally, it changes everything. This is the moment when a man realizes that one emotional connection has more power over him than logic, reputation, stability, or even fear. And when that happens, some men are willing to risk everything: their marriage, their career, their social standing, their carefully built identity. From the outside, people ask the same question again and again. Why would he throw it all away for that? But this question misunderstands the nature of what is really happening. Because this isn't about lust. It isn't about novelty. It isn't even about the other person. At least not entirely. This is about a psychological awakening that most men spend their entire lives unconsciously avoiding. And when it finally breaks through, it can feel more powerful than survival itself. Today, we're going to explore the real psychological reason some men risk everything for a single emotional connection, and why, for certain men, this experience feels less like a choice and more like destiny. From the time a man is young, he is taught one core lesson: control yourself, control your emotions, control your impulses, control your vulnerability. Strength, he learns, is restraint. He is praised for productivity, performance, endurance, and composure, but rarely for emotional honesty. So over time, something subtle happens. A man learns how to function, but not how to feel. He learns how to succeed, but not how to be seen. He learns how to provide, but not how to be emotionally held. This doesn't mean he becomes emotionless. It means his emotional world gets buried beneath responsibility, and buried things do not disappear. They wait. Many men go through relationships where they are needed but not known. They are valued for what they offer, not for who they are when the armor comes off. So they adapt. They become dependable, predictable, stable. But inside, a quiet emotional hunger grows. Not for excitement, not for sex, but for recognition, for resonance, for the feeling that someone sees past the role and into the man. This is where psychology becomes crucial. According to Carl Jung, every human carries an unconscious emotional world that seeks integration. For men, this inner emotional world is often neglected, suppressed, or ignored. Jung referred to this inner emotional dimension as the anima, the part of the male psyche that carries emotional sensitivity, intuition, vulnerability, and depth. When a man doesn't consciously engage with this part of himself, he doesn't eliminate it. He projects it. And projection is dangerous, because once projection occurs, the emotional world he has been denying himself becomes attached to a person. This is where everything changes. A man meets someone who doesn't demand performance, someone who doesn't need him to be impressive, someone who listens, not just to his words, but to his silence, someone who mirrors him emotionally. And suddenly, for the first time in years, maybe decades, he feels real, not powerful, not dominant, not successful, but alive. And that feeling hits him like oxygen after years of emotional suffocation. This is why the connection feels irrational, because it bypasses logic and goes straight to the nervous system. It activates parts of the psyche that have been dormant for years. When a man experiences emotional attunement, being emotionally understood without having to explain himself, his brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin all at once. This combination doesn't just create pleasure, it creates bonding. And when that bond forms during a period of emotional deprivation, it can feel overwhelming. Here is the truth most people don't understand. A man does not risk everything because the connection is better. He risks everything because the connection feels necessary. It feels like a return to himself, like meeting the version of him that got lost along the way. This is why some men describe these connections as unexplainable, why they say things like, "I've never felt this before. She understands me in a way no one ever has. I can't stop thinking about her." They aren't exaggerating. Their psyche has finally found resonance. Now let's address something uncomfortable. This emotional awakening often happens after a man has already built a life. After marriage, after children, after years of routine. Why? Because stability, while necessary, can slowly numb emotional awareness if it lacks depth. Many men confuse peace with fulfillment. They are not unhappy, but they are not emotionally alive either. So when an emotional connection pierces that numbness, it feels seismic. And this is where the risk begins. Because once a man has tasted emotional truth, returning to emotional absence feels unbearable. The psyche resists regression. Once awareness is awakened, suppression becomes painful. This creates internal conflict, duty versus desire, stability versus authenticity, loyalty versus self-recognition. From the outside, it looks selfish. From the inside, it feels existential. Here's something crucial to understand. Men are not taught how to emotionally integrate desire and responsibility. They are taught to choose one and suppress the other. So when an emotional connection awakens the suppressed self, it doesn't feel like temptation. It feels like survival. This is why some men become reckless. Not because they want chaos, but because their emotional world has been starving, and starvation makes people desperate. Another layer many people miss is identity collapse. A man builds his identity around roles: husband, father, provider, leader. But roles are not the same as selfhood. When an emotional connection mirrors his inner self rather than his outer role, it threatens the identity he has built. And paradoxically, it also makes him feel more authentic than ever. This creates a psychological fracture. Some men resolve this by pulling away, others by rationalizing, and some by risking everything. Because they believe, often unconsciously, that losing the connection would mean losing themselves again. Now let's be clear, not all emotional connections should be acted upon. Not all risks are justified. But understanding the psychology behind these choices matters. Because without understanding, people default to judgment. And judgment oversimplifies what is actually a deeply human experience. Here is a truth rarely spoken. Men don't fall apart because they are weak. They fall apart because they were strong for too long without emotional nourishment. This is also why men who experience deep emotional connection often describe it as spiritual, not just emotional, because it reconnects them to meaning, to presence, to something beyond performance. But here's the critical turning point. An emotional connection can either be a wake-up call or a destructive escape. The difference lies in awareness. When a man understands that the connection is revealing something missing within himself, he can begin integration. When he believes the connection is the only source of aliveness, he becomes dependent. This is where maturity matters. A psychologically integrated man doesn't destroy his life for connection. He uses the awakening to rebuild himself from the inside. But a fragmented man externalizes the awakening and chases it at all costs. So why do some men risk everything? Because for them, the emotional connection is not about another person. It is about reclaiming a lost self. And when identity is on the line, logic often loses. If you are listening to this and recognizing the pattern, either in yourself or someone you know, understand this. The answer is not suppression, and the answer is not destruction. The answer is integration, learning to feel without fleeing, to awaken without abandoning, to connect without collapsing. Because the most dangerous thing is not emotional connection. The most dangerous thing is emotional deprivation disguised as stability. And when a man finally feels emotionally seen after years of silence, he is not chasing another person. He is chasing himself. If this message resonated with you, sit with it. Not to judge, not to justify, but to understand. Because understanding is where transformation begins, and awareness is always the first risk worth taking.